For 10 years, we lived together like strangers under the same roof. Sometimes I still wonder when silence became louder than our laughter, when love became something we used to have, not something we still made. My name is Emma Callahan, and this isn't a story about falling in love. It's a story about learning to love again, after almost forgetting how. It was late autumn in our small Oregon coastal town, where the air always smelled of salt and pine. The waves outside our window crashed with the same rhythm they always had. But inside our home, everything was still. The kind of stillness that hums like a memory you can't erase. Daniel and I had been married for 10 years. We shared a bed, a mortgage, and a last name. But not much else. We spoke in logistics, bills, schedules, groceries. No more late-night whispers or morning kisses. Just quiet, polite exchanges, like coworkers who once might have been something more. I used to think love died with noise, with shouting, tears, betrayal. But ours faded in silence. 1,000 unsaid words slowly buried the things that used to make us, us. That night, I found myself staring at him across the dinner table, the soft glow of the pendant light flickering between us. He looked tired, or maybe just distant. I wanted to ask him if he still loved me, but I didn't, because I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Before we continue, if you've ever felt that quiet distance in a relationship, this story might feel a little too close. But maybe that's the point. If you're watching from somewhere in the world, let me know in the comments where you're from. And don't forget to subscribe to Possible Hearts for more real stories like this one. Because what happened next changed everything. It started on the night the lights went out, and we had no choice but to face the darkness together. It started with the sound of wind against the windows, the kind that howls like something alive. By the time I looked outside, the ocean was thrashing against the rocks, and the sky had turned the color of bruised steel. The local weather alert said it would pass by midnight. I didn't believe it. Daniel came home late, as usual. His jacket was soaked, his hair dripping rain onto the kitchen floor. "Traffic lights are out on the main road," he said, shaking his head. "Power lines are down. It's getting bad." I just nodded, pretending to read something on my phone, pretending not to care that his voice still had that calm, quiet tone that once made me feel safe, and now just made me feel invisible. The storm grew louder. The lights flickered, and then just like that, darkness. The entire house went black. For a moment, I couldn't even hear the ocean, only the pounding of my own heart. "Guess it's just us now," Daniel said softly, his voice somewhere in the dark. He found a flashlight, the beam cutting through the kitchen like a knife. I could see his face now, tired, lined, but strangely softer in the pale light. We lit candles. The storm outside became a soundtrack to our silence. Without the hum of the refrigerator, without the distraction of screens, the house suddenly felt alive. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind, it all filled the space between us. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, a candle between us like a fragile truce. He asked, "Remember the last time the power went out?" I hesitated. "Yeah," I whispered, "our second anniversary." He smiled, just barely. "You made s'mores in the fireplace, burned every single one." I laughed, a small, surprised sound that felt strange in my own mouth. For the first time in years, I met his eyes. And in that flickering light, something flickered between us, too. The candles painted our walls with gold and shadow, like the house itself was remembering us. Every time the flame wavered, I saw flashes of who we used to be. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the faint light tracing his jawline. "You still laugh the same," he said suddenly. I froze. It wasn't a compliment. It was something else. Nostalgia, maybe. Or regret. I didn't know what to say, so I busied myself with the candle wick. "You still forget to take off your wedding ring when you work on the car," I murmured. "You'll lose a finger someday." He chuckled, low and quiet. "Still worrying about me after all these years?" The question lingered. I didn't answer, because the truth was, I did. I just didn't remember how to show it anymore. Outside, the storm raged on. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain hit the roof like tiny fists. I watched the candle's light dance across his face, softening the man I'd learned to see as distant. There was a time when I knew every thought behind his eyes. Now they were unreadable. He got up and disappeared for a moment. When he returned, he was carrying an old thermos. "Hot cocoa," he said, almost shyly. "Found it in the back of the pantry." I blinked. The gesture was so small, so unexpected that it hurt. When he poured it into mugs, the smell brought me back. Late nights after snowstorms, our hands brushing as we passed each other the cup. We sat in silence again, sipping slowly. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was curious. "Emma," he said finally, setting his mug down, "do you ever think about who we used to be?" My throat tightened. "All the time," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Then maybe we should start remembering together." The power didn't come back that night, but something else did. The storm began to calm near midnight. The candles had burned low, their wax pooling on the table like melted thyme. We were both quiet, not because we had nothing to say, but because too much wanted to be said all at once. I leaned back in my chair, letting my eyes trace the faint outlines of our kitchen. The chipped paint, the photographs that hadn't been dusted in months, the life we'd built, slowly fading under layers of silence. Then Daniel spoke, carefully, as if choosing each word could change everything. "Emma, there's something I've been meaning to show you for a long time." I looked at him, confused. "Now? During a storm?" He gave a small, almost guilty smile. "Maybe it's the only time I'll have the courage." Before I could respond, he disappeared upstairs. I heard the creak of the attic door, then footsteps on the old wooden boards above. When he came back down, he was carrying a small wooden box, the kind that looks like it holds secrets. He set it gently on the table between us. My heart beat so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What is that?" I asked. "Memories. Yours. Ours." I hesitated before opening it. Inside were dozens of folded papers, worn and yellowed at the edges. My handwriting. My words. Letters. "You kept these?" I whispered, the air catching in my throat. He nodded. "Every single one you ever wrote me, from our first year together. I found them in an old drawer years ago. When things got hard, I'd read them. I didn't know how to tell you that they were the only thing that still made me feel close to you. My fingers trembled as I lifted one letter, the paper soft from time. The first line read, "Dear Daniel, I love the way you look at me like I'm still a mystery." The storm outside had gone silent, but inside me, something had just begun to roar. The candlelight flickered as I unfolded the letter, and for a moment, time didn't feel real anymore. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath. My words, the ones I had written as a young wife, so full of certainty, stared back at me. "Dear Daniel, I love that you believe in me even when I don't. I love that home isn't a place, it's wherever you are." I felt my throat tighten. Who was that woman? Who was I when I wrote those words? I looked up at Daniel. He was watching me, eyes glistening in the candlelight, his hands clasped tightly together. "There's more," he said softly. "Go on." I reached for another letter. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and old ink, a scent that somehow felt like safety and loss at all once. This one was written a year later, after our first big fight. "Even when we hurt each other, I know love is still here. It just hides sometimes, but I'll keep looking for it." Tears stung my eyes. I hadn't remembered writing that, but reading it now, it felt like a message from the version of me who still believed in miracles. Then I found one envelope I didn't recognize, different paper, folded neatly, but newer. I opened it. Inside, in Daniel's handwriting, were only a few words. "I wish you'd come back. I miss you, even when you're sitting right here." The air left my lungs. I looked at him, heart pounding. "When did you write this?" He swallowed hard. 2 years ago. I never sent it. You were already gone, even though you hadn't left." The house was silent, except for the rain tapping against the window. That night, I realized we weren't just two people who had grown apart. We were two people still reaching for each other, from opposite sides of the same room. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The candle flame wavered, throwing shadows that felt too honest. Daniel's confession hung between us like smoke, visible, suffocating, impossible to ignore. I finally whispered, "You missed me?" He met my eyes. Every day. The words hit something deep inside me. For years, I'd convinced myself that he didn't care anymore, that I was the only one still aching for what we'd lost. But hearing him say it cracked something open in me that I didn't know was still there. I set the letter down, my hands trembling. "Then why didn't you say something, Daniel? Why didn't you fight for us?" He exhaled, his jaw tightening. "Because I thought you didn't want me to. Every time I tried, it felt like you'd already decided we were over. I thought giving you space was what you needed." I shook my head, tears blurring everything. "No, I didn't need space. I needed you to notice I was disappearing." The storm outside picked up again, a sudden gust rattling the window panes. It felt almost fitting, nature screaming what we couldn't. "I was afraid," he said, finally. His voice cracked on the word. "Afraid that if I reached for you again, you wouldn't reach back." The room went quiet. My chest ached. I wanted to yell, to cry, to tell him he was right. I hadn't reached back. Somewhere along the way, I stopped trying. I stood and walked toward the window. The rain shimmered like glass. "When did we forget how to love each other?" I whispered. Daniel came up behind me, close, but not touching. Maybe we didn't forget, he said softly. Maybe we just stopped practicing. For the first time in years, I didn't pull away. We stood there for what felt like hours, just breathing the same air, the sound of the rain softening outside. The house smelled of wax and damp wood, and somewhere in that silence, I felt something shift. I turned toward him. His eyes looked tired but honest. "Daniel," I whispered, "what are we even doing? 10 years, and we don't even know how to hold each other anymore." He looked down, his voice barely a murmur. "Maybe we can learn again." Those words, "learn again," settled deep in my chest. Not start over, not fix it, not go back, just learn again. I didn't know what to say. So I walked toward the kitchen counter and blew out the last candle. The house plunged into total darkness. Only the rain remained, a quiet rhythm like a heartbeat. And then, in that darkness, Daniel spoke. He said, "Let's make a promise." I could hear the tremor in his voice, the kind that only comes from holding something fragile for too long. "A promise?" I asked softly. "Yeah," he said, "that when things get quiet like this, when we start to drift again, we won't wait for the lights to go out. We'll sit, we'll talk, even if it's hard, even if we don't have the right words." I felt my throat tighten. "And if we don't want to talk?" He whispered, "Then we'll sit in the dark, together." Tears filled my eyes. I reached out through the darkness, and his hand found mine halfway. Warm, familiar, real. We stood there, two people who had forgotten the language of love, learning again. One touch, one promise, one heartbeat at a time. The storm outside had passed, but the one inside us had finally broken. By dawn, the storm had passed. The sky outside our window glowed pale blue, streaked with gold. The power was still out, but the world felt brighter somehow, as if light had found its way back into places we didn't know were dark. Daniel was asleep on the couch, a blanket half over him, his hand still resting near mine. For a moment, I just watched him, the rise and fall of his chest, the soft lines at the corners of his eyes. 10 years of distance, and yet this man still felt like home. I walked to the window and looked out at the sea. The waves were calm again, slow and deliberate, like they too were catching their breath. Last night didn't fix everything. We didn't magically fall back into the kind of love we once had, but something changed, something small, something true. Later that morning, Daniel woke up and came to stand beside me. The light caught in his hair, and he smiled. Not the old smile, not yet, but something new. "Coffee?" he asked. I nodded. "Only if we drink it together." He laughed quietly. "Deal." As we stood there, I realized love isn't something that vanishes. It just hides sometimes, waiting for a promise, a word, a moment of courage to bring it back into focus. We didn't rebuild our marriage in one night, but that night reminded us of something we'd both forgotten, that love isn't something you find, it's something you choose to keep building, even in the dark. Thank you for watching Possible Hearts. If this story touched you, don't forget to click like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And what promise would you make if love gave you one more chance?